Get the whole story.
In the financial year 2022-2023, Kenya shillings 54 billion was allocated to university education, both as grant and as loans. In the next financial year, under the new model, we are increasing the budgetary allocation from 54 billion to 84.6 billion, an extra 30.6 billion. This is an increase of 56% and translates to an increase of funding per student from 152,000 to Kenya shillings 208,000, an increase of 37%. Universities and TVETs will no longer receive, under the new funding model, block funding in form of grants based on differentiated unit costs. The government has resolved that university funding will henceforth be student-centered and be apportioned to individual students according to their level of need. For the first time, students whose households are at the bottom of the pyramid shall enjoy equal opportunity in accessing university and TVET education. Their households shall not make any contributions towards the education of their children because of their financial status. Students from less needy households joining university will receive government scholarship of up to 53% and loans from the government of up to 40%, a total of 93%.
So that was President William Ruto yesterday, all to do with the new university funding shocker. That's on the front page of the Standard. Once you grab yourself a copy, you'll definitely get to interact with the nitty-gritty details of the change in terms of university funding. But just to enunciate what the president mentioned yesterday, it seems that all students will be required to make fresh applications requesting to be considered for government funding. And this time round, students will be categorized according to 4 levels of need: vulnerable, extremely needy, and less needy. So it's interesting, bearing in mind the challenges we've seen in public universities in the country. I think the latest details as of February show that public universities owe statutory bodies around 61.1 billion Kenya shillings. And of course, we have a higher uptake in terms of higher learning. And this is definitely a cause of concern. Bunyasi Sakwa, I'm pretty sure you had a couple of points pending. You can equally address them, but talk to us about this as someone who's enthusiastic about education, and equally you're implementing Vision 2030. How critical is such a move in terms of enhancing education? And we heard from the president, including those at the lower cadres of society into this particular program.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. First of all, education is probably the single most important after food commodity that we enjoy and that we need badly. And it's a challenge in many countries, how to finance higher education. It's a big challenge, but it is doable. I'm glad that we are now focusing on it as an issue. The president has pronounced on it, but I would hope that debates and discussions will continue to refine what the concept is. Of course, agree where it's working well and where it may not be working well, if we can bring all of that to the table. Now, I personally would never have gone to university if there was no scholarship program. In my days, which was a few years after, I went to university in 1968, and at that time, the higher education was being paid for, plus you got a stipend on it.
It was boom.
Yes, but there were some exclusions at that time. I remember my former classmates who were non-African had to pay, but the payments were low. But those were British citizens of Indian origin, for example, who were in Kenya, and I had quite a number of those in the school I went to do my A-levels. Now, I would not have gone through university, and many probably would not have. Around this table, there may be exceptions to that. Governor Derito, maybe I would have gone to school anyway.
He's been on the receiving end today. I need to protect him.
No, I think this is all, I'm sure he would agree. He would probably agree, or by association, they might have refused to give him bursary and so on. I needed that to go to school. Today, as having been a politician and seeing this firsthand, the need is even greater. And anecdotally, it almost seems as if children of the poor seem to do better than the children of the very wealthy. That's probably counterintuitive, but that's how I have observed it. If you don't assist them...
When you say better, what do you mean?
Higher grades. They qualify better for university than the average student of local, rural middle class at least, and so on. Now, if we don't do that, we are going to get a very highly stratified society with opportunities being stratified even, meaning that if you come from a poor family, by definition, you're not going to go anywhere, and so on. So now those, then have to prepare for jobs that are probably more menial than they would have been. Countries like India, India is a big country and it has very many good aspects. They are all the way down to the stars and way down here. So if I say something that's critical, it's not about the country as a whole. But India and Pakistan, also to a large extent, has dual systems of education, linguistically dual. There are schools all the way to university where you can do your studies in Urdu, and the others you do it in English. It's true in many parts of India. India is almost like a federal state, so it's not true for every state, but many of them. And Pakistan is across the country. The net result, that each time I went into India and you have discussions with senior government officials, you would find that those who have a chance to rise up in the hierarchy are those who speak English. The others are also very important. They are holding jobs there, but the chance of them surfacing to the top are very minimal. So that kind of dual structure is what we must avoid. That the children of the poor in Kenya don't get a chance. So I like President Ruto's initiative on this, that they would increase the amounts available as scholarships, which means their grant, and bursaries for the lower ones, and that even the help should also be made bigger and more efficient, because it's not just for tuition costs, it's the living costs. The kid gets from the village, comes to Nairobi, has to find a place to go and live, has to cook for themselves, and so on. I pass on a shortcut on Mamlaka Road, which is right beside Nairobi Primary and opposite the women's halls of residence. I shortcut there as I come into town. And the students are, buy their foods from those open kiosks. They are run, I'm told, also by students, student entrepreneurs. I doubt the levels of public hygiene there. That's how I see it. We are making our students have a very low level of tolerance of standards that they should have been insisting on having. But be that as it may, here they have to cope. Because even down in their dining rooms now, you have cash on your meal card every day to be able to eat. We're pretty much guaranteed that ourselves. You have to have a card to be a student, that you're a student, but the cash had no value embedded in it. With it, you are guaranteed a meal. But now their cards have values embedded in them. You can eat out, you can eat off your card before the end of the semester if you bring in too many guests or things like that. These are areas that are some of the most important things. And for people around this table, I am sure that getting your own children proceed in life through the education ladder in that age group is very, very important. So I really, I want to commend this administration, President Ruto's administration, that they are trying to make improvements. They should now, as we go forward, as they implement this, we allow open debate on it so that we can refine. For example, the issues of targeting the needy, very tricky. As Mheshimiwa Tandaza said, don't go and ask the chief to give you a list of that. We all know what has happened with the old age pensions. Malipa was there, sorry, that old age, is that sort of pension.
They're using pastors, by the way. That I think the
Well,
president
but
mentioned.
now this is the worst time to
I knew it.
the Mackenzies and the Ezekiels. And let me tell you, there's nothing intrinsically superior about church ministers in dealing with questions of integrity. No, it isn't. So I think we just have to get the laws and the rules and the practice and shame and name those who are not doing it right until we get this need. That's a very important area. I couldn't apply it. I don't know about the former MPs, the MP Tandaza and the former MP Nderitu, whether in your bursary days you could differentiate by need. For me, that was a desire. I couldn't do it because I couldn't get reliable data. System. Yes, otherwise it will get abused. You have to rely on your people to tell you this one is really needy. And you go there and you find, no, that's his sister's son or something like that, and say it didn't work. So let me just say that I think this is a window that we should all subscribe to so that we can move it forward. There were other issues, there were many issues discussed, but I don't know if you want me to go there.
Sure, just briefly before we cross over here.
I don't know where I should start on this broad array of things, but I think we should, as we agree that we the people are sovereign, I think we must also inculcate a culture where you truly go to a demonstration intending to walk or sit, as they do sometimes, and go home safe. That you can have women. Children should not be allowed in these demonstrations. You know, they're Kenyans, they're rights, but they aren't yet at a level in which you can make the judgments needed to stay, focused and doing what the right thing to be done. But for those who do go, should be able to go in and come out safely. Now it's pretty risky as it is at the moment. We should change the law to outlaw.
I've taken the issue of stones. This
stones.
I've not.
Okay. For example. We should be stricter with the police use of tear gas and so on. But you should have, take precautions, have the vans around with water canisters on the side in case you have to come. Those ones don't kill anybody. They just inconvenience you seriously. We shouldn't have police carry weapons that they use liberally. I think that's although they are, of course, police have a bigger responsibility than we might be assuming. Yeah, that at the end of the day, people say, see, property has been damaged. Where were you, police? Of course, we can blame the criminals in the demonstrators, but the police, I think now are being pushed on. So I hope that future demonstrations will do better. On the economy, there's a lot to say about that. I just want to say one thing on debt. When I was a member of parliament, I brought up a bill, a very substantive bill. If length was anything to go by, this is 68 pages. It's a full-fledged public debt management authority bill. And the idea was to look at the value chain of debt and see how you apply merit to it along the way. You see how you improve the reporting and the openness on the data. You see how you can give it an element of autonomy from the mandarins of Treasury in working out so that there's some kind of negotiation and Parliament comes in there. And also how you force Parliament. And I want to say this because I was very concerned that a lot of the approval of the debt, the creeping debt, was by Parliament. Through the difference between the ordinary revenues and the expenditure that is being proposed every year. It didn't seem so. And the problem was, tying down was very difficult indeed because a member looks at it and says, I had a road in here, rather I had a road, it's not in the budget. I had this dam or this expenditure or that expenditure, which are not here. So you negotiate with the officials, the Treasury, finally, they adjust some of it. And how do they adjust? They increase the expenditure side. And the very composition of expenditure is not yet democratized in Parliament. In theory, Parliament makes the budget. That they should be able to throw out the whole budget if they didn't like it and have it re-prepared from zero. And they have the capacity also to do so in Parliament. But no. we still use, I don't know if it has changed, Tandaza, the old, I think it was that you are not allowed to change more than some ridiculously small figure in the old pre-2010 constitution days. Yes. Yeah, you can only change extremely marginally. No, right now they're allowed to do so. So as an MP, the only part that is accounted for is the little money that goes to CDF, a very small amount where the MPs can have total control, and it's used generally well, except in a few cases where there may be problems, as they say. But like 80% of the budget comes in and goes untouched, which is a real problem. And then what happens there? The interests of the executive then become the rule. I sat on the finance committee, but more importantly, the budget committee, and you could see that there are limitations to how much you can cut through to the chase, as they say. Is that what they say? Cutting it to the chase and so on. Parliament should abrogate to itself much more authority to handle this. And if Parliament gets that, Parliament is a good place for that to happen. There are varying views here and there, but they cancel out each other and they will move in the right direction.
Okay. Would you allow on this, I mean, amongst all of us, because this point that Mheshimiwa raises, and you know he is also chair of Vision 2030, is at the foundation of what is wrong. Because you see, every year we pass budgets that contain a growing and growing and growing deficit. Now, whether you want to now later point fingers at Tandaza or at Ramogi, the issue is, by definition, as this budget deficit is growing,
so
how do you exactly? Because the only way you finance a deficit is debt, and perhaps Mheshimiwa Tandaza, since he's in Parliament right now, can speak to this particular point. But that is at the heart of the whole problem. And until, as political leaders, as political parties, take a view about the budget deficit and whether we want balanced budgets or whether we think it's okay to continue forever with budget deficit, we will always be in this problem. Mheshimiwa Tandaza. I mean, on this particular, we will come back to good order, but on this particular,
Mheshimiwa Tandaza, uwanja ni wako. Tumekutandazia.
I think there are two issues here. As senior Mheshimiwa Sakwa was giving his views, I was very keen on what he was talking about. And the first thing is, we all agree our budget deficit is unmanageable. Let's be honest. But what can we do now? And I think that is what we are addressing as the Kenya Kwanza government. That's what the president is doing by cutting that deficit, because there is no other way. You just need to cut that deficit. But as you cut it now, where do we put ourselves to the eyes and the eyes of the public? Because certainly the recurrent expenditure has to be met, isn't it? Salaries and whatever to be met. So you can only cut on development budget. And then that's why I was so keen on what Senior Bunyas was saying, that as you cut on development, I go back to Matuga and tell my people, we were expecting this road to be done, but because now we've cut on development, there'll be no road for the next 5 years. One, I'll not come back. For me, not coming back is not a problem. But across board, that particular regime becomes very unpopular. You know, they will say, now, irrespective of the debt which you are talking about, they will say, during Uhuru's time, during Kibaki's time, we had dams, we had roads. Now, where is this money going? You know, they will imagine that the money is there, only that now it's not being put into development. So it will take a lot of education, and I think what else? We were avoiding the pastors. We were avoiding the word prayer. For actually the population, the general, actually the people now to understand what you are talking about and the way to go about it. The current situation, you've said, we are going to fix it, but it's not instant coffee. It needs time, and people, I think including the governor, was saying, no, we need results now. People can't wait, you know. And here we are actualizing that thing. So this is a thing that the current government is getting it right. The problem is the time versus the expectations of the people. I think that is the greatest problem. But on the issue again about rationalizing the budget and cutting down to the core and seeing the best thing, as you were talking also, something came into my mind. Would it have been better if the financial year and the budget cycle were actually altered? Because we are going for recess from today, coming back on 5th of June. I think the budget reading is on 12th, isn't it?
Yeah.
The financial year is ending, such that even if
You're under pressure.
you're under pressure, you know, and these are the timelines that we are working on. It's not a question of this government or the MP, but are those the timelines? So I think, would it require the intervention of Treasury or the financial economic advisors probably to alter those timelines? Because the timelines are in such a manner that if you don't do it, then you can't even run the government, including yourself getting your salary and whatever. I don't know whether it was by design or it is by accident. I'm not sure what other developed countries normally handle their budgets.
This parliament should object.
This parliament.
To the
So
executive,
probably
yes.
we'll need some bit of legislation.
Yes.
But before we go to him, there was something I wanted to say about the MCAs and the county government.
Kindly, and what he questioned about identifying the most vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. I'll come back to the issue of education. That was my last bite. But the issue of MCAs. The MCAs are suffering just like any other person. You see, there is no money. Everybody doesn't have money in his pocket. Unakumbuka pesa Sokoni. So it's not, the MCAs are right, but even the matatu drivers are right, the mama mbogas are right, everybody doesn't have money. That is for sure. That is for sure. But I think...
But you know what MCAs compare themselves to? Members of parliament.
Yeah, of course, as Ramogi talked about, there is a disparity. There is no doubt about it, about the highest income earner and the lowest. In fact, in Kenya, you might not talk about the lowest. Most people have nothing. They're not earning anything. I didn't say anything about the issue of the minimum wage. But apart from, it would be wrong to say it's obsolete, but it's non-existent. Because even when you put it, people can't, they're looking for something to eat. You know, the minimum wage, me, I've been in construction as an engineer, and we say, tunalipa kibarua yetu 500 shillings per day. But somebody is willing to work for 300 because he just needs a packet of unga. So the whole issue of the minimum wage actually in Kenya is not applicable. You are only applying it to the government institutions, probably.
Yeah.
And what is the percentage of people? The statistics we are looking at is that the private sector handles 82%, which is basically informal, where you can't apply that. So that is the problem. But on the county governments, and the governor is here, I think we also have to look at the way they run the county governments, the way they generate their own revenue. The trend that you are getting that they are collecting less as county governments compared to the local governments. I think this beats anybody's logic. With the staff they have employed in this era of automation, which they have almost every county is talking about automation, I think we have avoided the topic of corruption on this table. Let me not mention it. But I think that is I'm not mentioned it. I'm not mentioned it.
Opening a can of worms.
No, I'm not mentioned it. I said, let me not mention it.
Okay.
So we leave it at that.
Yes,
Let's go to education. Education.
Yeah.
University education. Before we go to the university education, let's look at education, and I'll want to use not more than 2 minutes. One, the fundamental question is education the responsibility of the government or the responsibility of the individual? I think that is where my problem is, because even with the little bursary that I have, everybody literally applies for that fund. And they tell you, I have a right. This taxpayers' money. Yes, I'm working at Kenya Ports Authority, I'm working at the county government, but I have 10 kids somewhere in university. You know, that is the reality. And I don't think, for those who have been in there, that's the reality. So I think the basic conversation would be, if it's the responsibility of the government, then let the government do it. If it's a responsibility of the individual, then individuals should also take responsibility. To me, the only way forward, I can't see the government managing education totally. It will just boil down to the individual. So I think they should be very clear that me as Kasim, I have a right to educate my kid, even if I have access to bursaries and scholarships. You see, that basic education I think is missing to most people. I've said I'm avoiding the word which I don't want to mention, because that is where it goes to. Now, the next step is what Mheshimiwa Bunyasi was talking about. This is, in policy, this is the best way to go. I have people in my constituency, and I believe in most constituencies, where this person has nothing to eat. For somebody who has nothing to eat, he certainly cannot afford anything, including that text, that exercise book, ya CBC. So definitely the government has to come in. But the problem now will be the processes. I hope, apart from this policy statement, we'll go further now and say, how do I identify these, the most vulnerable, the most needy, and whatever, because that is where I think the distinction will be totally lost. And if we do it that way, then the poor will continue suffering, and the rich will have it all, which will be a time bomb as time goes by.
Finally,
Finally.
I recognize the fact that there are many things to discuss. Let me start with education. And I say that at the end of the day, I think I agree with Mheshimiwa Tandaza that the responsibility to educate is the parents. But it is also, you know, government is also the responsibility of the parents, because government exists courtesy of the parents' taxes, and it cushions the community against some ills or difficulties. For example, it cushions the community against extreme inequalities. And so the idea to ensure that needy students access education without reservation, I think it's brilliant, and I think it's good. And then there's a tier 2, which is able to access scholarship versus loans, and that's okay. Because the challenge has been, there are some people who are accessing some of these bursaries, scholarships, merely on account of their positioning.
And association.
And association. I know Mheshimiwa Tandaza, and so I can always call my in-laws in Kwale and tell them, how are you? You know, I know Mheshimiwa now. If ukitaka bursary, we ongea na mimi mzuri. And then we approach, and I don't think that's right. But there's the other part also, which is, we've recognized the importance of education to parents and to voters. And so the Mheshimiwa at the local level, the MCA, has a bursary. This gentleman has a bursary. The governor has a bursary. So almost everybody has a bursary to give, including the president through the Ministry of Education. Why can't we take all this money and just give the schools or the institutions, and then say, let the institutions, give these bursaries, as opposed to having it on our political hands? And I know this will be unpopular to some members.
Very. Leave they are part of the problem.
See the light of day.
They are part of the problem.
Because that would release a lot of resources to needy people. While on this subject, I must say that I think the real issue is poverty. If you look at the problems we are having in Malindi, Kilifi right now, Shakahola versus Mavueni at Pastor Ezekiel's, that is just extreme poverty and desperation that pushes people to believe whatever is peddled by false prophets. And I think we need to work on that. I believe that education has a significant role to play in ensuring that poverty goes away. I still insist, if I can come back to this subject, I still insist, because I see my senior, Mheshimiwa Bunyasi, is keen on this suggestion, that this idea of making stones, carrying of stones to be legal one, is targeted.
I think his points are up.
I think so.
But equally, because of time, as you come in, we have to talk about the CBK governor, even as we get the final comments.
Allow me to finish, because I did not finish.
Oh, you hadn't finalized. Okay.
Yes, the parliament, the role of parliament to work on the budget, and the timetable of parliament. Let me start with the timetable of parliament. On this one, I agree totally. That even at an economist level, I am reviewing, for example, the year 2022. But you see, in terms of budgeting, I can only do 2022, 2023.
Yeah.
So I do not have, for example, because let's assume the budget is the input document and the economic survey is the output document. So now comparing the two is very difficult because one is discussing half of last year and half of the other year. While this other one, the output document, is discussing 1 year, 1 full year. So I think that needs to be aligned. But the challenge is our financial year is an issue of the EAC, the whole EAC. So then we need to go back to the EAC and we can talk to Mheshimiwa Kanini Kega that he plays that role and goes to the EAC and tells the EAC, no, we need to have a financial year that is in tandem with the calendar year, so that starts to make sense. But Parliament has also abrogated its duty. It does not need to, for example, apportion itself responsibility, because the Constitution is superior to standing orders. And the Constitution gives power to Parliament in terms of the pass, the pass of the country. That power is with Parliament. The Cabinet Secretary's role is policy. And so if Parliament has abrogated its duty and said they can only rubber stamp, perhaps because they have little time, I don't think that is accurate. I think they need to work on their own timetable and in a way that ensures that that document is properly reviewed. Because if Parliament was active, we would not have owed China 1 trillion shillings, which we still don't know where it went to, because apparently the SGR would have been built with less than 200 billion.
Interesting. So, gentlemen, due to time, I'll definitely give each a round to perhaps buttress certain points. But equally, we could talk about the race to succeed CBK governor, which perhaps the candidates will be interviewed. I think it's on May 9th. We have 6 shortlisted candidates. Of course, meritocracy will definitely be of key concern. Equally, we find ourselves in a position as a country, the International Monetary Fund, equally, following our economic decisions. So perhaps this might be followed as well. I don't know. Gentlemen, give us your take as we finalize on this and other issues as well. I'll start with you.
Well, if I were giving advice to the interviewing panel, I would look for an individual, first of all, who is going to, who has a strong view about how to manage certain things. Because look, IMF or any of these institutions are not necessarily neutral. They're not driven by, if you will, altruistic. And I have worked in these institutions. My colleague is, we've both worked in this institution, we know that. So what you need is somebody who can stand up to IMF and do what is good for Kenya, not what IMF is saying. And look, IMF will tell you, a bit like Ramogi is trying to say here, that you cannot be negative interest rates. Who says who? I mean, that is old economics. Today, many
not
countries,
interest rates, inflation.
So somebody who can form their view out of their own technical expertise and the team around them and do those things because they are good for Kenya. That is who I would look for.
Okay.
Parliament is in charge of its own calendar. If he finds what is going on today is inconvenient, they can change it. 3 ideas on how to reduce the budget deficit. First, remove duplication. Now, and there's a process going on by the technical committee, intergovernmental relations technical committee. What Parliament should do is take this report and implement it. Look, national government, frankly, is spending somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 billion doing things that are county functions. Avoid duplication and you will save between 300 and 400. What example? Take Ministry of Health. What has Ministry of Health got to do running around the country pretending to build health centers or level 3 hospitals? These are county functions. First of all, the Ministry of Health will do it very, very inefficiently because he is an officer here trying to build a dispensary in Muchongoi at the boundary of Laikipia and Baringo. So avoid duplication and save. Number 2, lower interest rates, because the big expenditure, and right now, debt finance is actually more than the rest of the recurrent expenditure. If you reduce, and if you look at the budget documents that Parliament passed, the total amount of shillings used to service domestic debt is 3 times the total amount in Kenya shillings that is used to service external debt. So the problem is domestic debt, and it is short term. How will you get out of that problem? You can't get it by making treasury bills 11%. You need to bring treasury bills down to 2%, to 1%, and that is how you will bring the whole thing down. And we can go on when we have time, perhaps next time.
Sure.
We can present another 4 ideas. And the chair of Vision 2030, we've been in this whole thing with him, even Mheshimiwa Tandaza. They know it. They just need the will to do it.
Thank you, Jesse. Very brilliant ideas from Mheshimiwa ex-Governor Nderitu here. And these are the type of contributions that we need at the national level for this country. It's not an issue of looking at this individual or that individual, that side or that side. And I repeat, Mheshimiwa, your ideas, any good ideas, will be taken up by the Kenya Kwanza government for as long as they are going to be implemented. I didn't quite agree on your first session when you talked about duplication. Yes, there could be duplication, but I don't think it is in the manner that you are putting it. Because if the national government does a level 3 hospital in your county, it can be done by the county government. But that money that the county government would use basically comes from the national government. So it really doesn't, you don't save on that one, unless you are saying you don't need that health center or you don't need that level 3. Of course, there are no dispensaries from where I sit done by the national government. But maybe you don't need that level 5 hospital. That's a different matter, that they are doing something which is not needed. Okay. Then that will be a different matter. But probably where now you would also improve, you should have talked about, is the way you manage those resources at the county level and your generation in terms of revenue collection. I think that's another wanting problem which can help, can ease the burden on the national government. Otherwise, on the topic of the day,
briefly, yeah,
it's there. The debt is high. We need to actually manage that debt. So many good ideas are there. The current government is working on that one. We are focusing on the bottom of the ladder. When we are talking about even the financing of the university, you can see we are giving more money or much preference to the hustlers down there. Okay. And that is the right way to go.
Well, then,
please, it's not all gloomy. Okay. We'll get out of that.
Need time. Yeah.
We'll get out of the duplication is in the bureaucracy and the whole machinery. Yes, you need whatever, but the machinery is already in the county. You don't need to create a new one in Nairobi.
All right, Ramogi, briefly, kindly.
Yes, for the first time, I agree with
Save the best.
Since the whole morning.
On 2 things. One, I don't like this idea of duplication.
Yeah.
The Constitution has given health management to the county government. Yeah. Let the counties manage health. Initially, 10 years back, we would say they lack the capacity. I don't think that can pass anymore today. And yes, national government still has the responsibility to invest, to train, to support for international relations around the issue of health. But ultimately, in terms of implementation, I think we need to allow county governments to do their work. And I don't think we are helping devolution when we take it up. The second thing, again, which I agree with Mheshimiwa Nderitu, on inflation we differ. We cannot bring it less than 2.5. Okay. On interest rates, we agree totally. I think raising the interest rates in the spirit of managing inflation has not worked. We have tried it since late last year. It's not working. And again, because we are focusing on supply side, on demand side issues, while the problem is in fact the supply side. The focus on production is good, and if we can do it more efficiently, it will work. But if we lower the interest rates, we will avail resources to mwananchi wa kawaida. We will ensure mwananchi wa kawaida has more access to resources.
Thank you.
Central Bank.
30 seconds briefly, kindly, because
Yes.
he equally needs to
Yes,
have
Central
a final
Bank,
say here.
I think whether we like it or not, for some reason, the IMF and the World Bank always has their guy there. And so you can just look around and you'll know someone who's either been in that system or someone who has been with the IMF or the World Bank. And
well noted.
You get your candidate.
Sakwa Bunyasi,
I think the
finally.
next central bank governor must be somebody who is conscious they're leading a major financial institution that is set up for the development of Kenya. Very important. They must get involved. And we have seen countries among the BRICS, the countries like Brazil, India, and so on, and China, how they really hold off the World Bank and the IMF at bay, because there are certain interests, and they talk one language from central bank boss. They are areas of disagreement and so on. So I hope that, looking at these candidates, I don't want to pronounce I see some worries if depending on who is elected among them. I don't want to go there too much. So we need somebody who is actually acting for Kenya, totally. Lastly, last night I listened to a statement by the Fed chairman talking about the interest rate question and how they have gone through successive increases over time. You know, these are corrective measures for their economy, but the net result that the dollar is going to become now the magnet that's going to attract money from all over the place. So we're still going to, the dollar shortage for us relative to our own shilling is going to continue for a while. So, but there are ways of dealing with it as Kenya, if the central bank, the treasury person begin to work together, knowing that that's the truth, the reality for a certain time. I would like to see frequent press conferences by the central bank governor and the CS treasury. Public. They should not leave it to the president only. Thank you.
Well noted, gentlemen. And he said it's not all gloom. It seems the sun
Central bank
listened to
Central
you.
bank governor who understands the bottom-up economic model. Thank you. Yeah, he must understand it.
He had to have the final say. Asanteni sana, Ndiritu Mureithi, it's a pleasure. Kasim Tandaza, always a pleasure. Ramogi Odhiambo, asante sana for your time. And Sakwa Bunyasi, we appreciate your input, gentlemen. And that's a good way to start the day on economic matters. My name is Jesse Rogers. You've been watching Morning Prime.